How are you? This is Frances Reaves, president of Parent Your Parents. And I'm here with this great guy who, this is actually the first time we've met, but we've talked on the phone many times, David Brevda, who is a partner. And I love the name of his law firm, Senior Justice Law Center. I mean, really, don't we all need senior justice? It's what I talk about every day. So, David, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Frances.
So tell me what David does at Senior Justice.
We do a lot, but we really focus our practice on a specific area of law of defending elders from abuse. So we focus on nursing home abuse, assisted living facility abuse, home health abuse. Those are our focuses.
Oh, gosh, that's great. Now, when did you realize that this was so necessary, or has it always been necessary? Were you always aware of it?
That's a great question. It's a really interesting way that I fell into this world. Basically, my law partner started it, who happens to be my brother. And I was working in London at a big firm, and I didn't really feel like I was helping anybody. I spent my whole life being a lawyer, and I wanted to help out. And once he started telling me about this and showing me the pictures and showing me the injuries, I couldn't look away. It was so infuriating that nobody's doing anything about this. And once I saw that, I got hooked, and now I'm dedicating my career towards it.
Oh, gosh, that's wonderful. So tell us what the process is. I mean, when someone's watching this, and they go visit their parents in a nursing home. And I remember when I used to go see mom, I thought any little thing was a horrible thing because she was my mother. But what really is a horrible thing? When should they call you?
Well, that's a great question, Frances. And it's very difficult to say in a succinct sentence, but the answer is call us if you see anything, because you don't need to know that. We need to know that. We have the expertise to kind of look into injuries and look into things to see if there's something that we could hold them accountable for. But I think a good way to look at it is injuries. That's the key. So basically, there's 4 components to a negligence lawsuit: duty, breach, causation, damages. Those are the 4 things that the plaintiff needs to show in order to hold the facility accountable for what they did. And we can take those one at a time and kind of briefly discuss them. Duty. Do they have a duty to do something? For example, if someone is a fall risk, did they have a duty to make sure they didn't fall? Yeah, for sure. And there are things that I'm sure we'll be talking about how to meet that duty. Breach. Did they breach that duty? Did they not put the protections in place? If they didn't do that, did that cause damages? Did they fall and break a hip or get a subdural hematoma, a brain bleed? Those are the things that we look for. And that's the way that we can hold these facilities accountable. With that said, and one of the things I want to talk about today is I hope it never gets to that point. I hope you don't need to call us. And one of the things I want to talk about with you, Frances, is ways to look out for red flags to prevent these injuries from happening so we don't have to deal with that.
Well, first of all, I love that. I love the fact that it's the red flags that we can actually stop right now. So why don't you tell us a few of those?
Sure.
And I can look out for them too when I go visit my clients.
Sure. And I think that there's some key injuries that we should be speaking about that a lot of folks in nursing homes and assisted living facilities are at high risk for. Falls, bed sores, infections, dehydration, malnutrition, and aspiration pneumonia are some that we see over and over and over again.
What's aspiration pneumonia?
So aspiration pneumonia is a fancy word for choking up on something and having something go in your lungs. And we see that a lot with people with compromised swallowing. And that happens a lot in the elderly. And there's specific diets that people need to be put on a place for: mechanical soft diets, assistance with eating, especially people with compromised mentation. They might need assistance because
what's compromised mentation? I know I don't mean to interrupt you, but
of course. No. That's a very good point. And sorry if I'm speaking too legally here.
No, that's good. That's good.
So what it is someone with dementia, someone with Alzheimer's, because you and I know to take a small bite. You and I know to drink some water afterwards. But maybe someone who's has Alzheimer's won't understand that. And they'll take big bites of food that they can't handle, and then they choke and they cough, and food particles enter their lungs, creating pneumonia, which could lead to serious injuries or even death.
Wow. And now the pneumonia is from the food going down into the lung.
That's right.
And the lungs, to protect themselves, get fluid.
So I think,
not that you're a doctor.
yes.
But
and I obviously know some of this tangentially from doing these cases, but I'm not a doctor. Let me clarify for everybody. No, so I think a good way to think about aspiration pneumonia, everyone has aspirated. You've had, you know, when you drink something that goes down the wrong pipe and you cough it up?
Yeah.
Well, you and I are healthy and it coughs it up, it comes back out. For people with, swallowing issues, it might not. And that's how it starts. And it's not just food. It can be water. It could even be vomit. It could be acid reflux.
Oh, yeah.
And so you'll see at a lot of nursing homes with people with these issues where they'll be on an order to have the head of their bed raised. A particular,
so that they don't aspirate.
And a particular high risk person is someone on a G tube, on tube feeding.
Oh, yeah.
They should always have an elevated bed. If you ever see a loved one who's on a G tube and their bed is flat, you need to be telling the staff to raise that bed, because that is a huge risk for aspiration.
Well, as long as we're on feeding tubes, I've had several clients. I would never put anyone on a feeding tube. Okay. I mean, that's just me, and everybody, it's in all my papers, and most of my clients are that way. But why do people put them on feeding tubes?
Well, and I want to kind of stress that these are very personal decisions.
I understand.
Feeding tubes, DNRs, all of those things, I can't opine on. It's a family decision, and it's not my place to say. Health-wise, why someone would go on a feeding tube is they can't swallow. They're a huge risk for aspiration.
Okay.
So if they have dysphagia where they can't swallow, that is a way to get nutritional needs. And there have been people that I've seen, that clients that I've seen and met, that are on feeding tubes that live a normal-ish life. It's not, but again, I don't want to tell someone who's watching the show, you should or you shouldn't do that. That is a completely personal decision. And I would definitely discuss that with, your doctor and with the family and with your loved one, if they're able to, understand and kind of discuss the positives and negatives of that.
Well, actually, what you're doing here, and I'm appreciative of it, David, is you are preaching exactly what I preach. You have to make all those decisions when you're healthy, because in the moment, you can't. You can't make those decisions. It's really, I mean, everybody wants to live. It's really easy to be intellectual about dying. Oh, yes, we're all going to die. But how many of us imagine that death? I mean, none of us emotionally want to die. I mean, maybe somebody does, but I don't think not either you or I. So it is true. You have to plan that now, Tommy. Just like Tommy's our producer, and I keep talking to him about estate plans. But you have to let your loved ones know. That's the first thing. But there you are on a feeding tube, and often it's because your loved one wants you on a feeding tube.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what are the duties of the nursing home or the assisted living center once you're on that feeding tube?
So there's a lot of complexity there, and it depends on other factors. So I can't say that every patient is not exactly the same.
Okay.
But things that you would be looking for with a tube feeding patient is cleaning of the tubes, making sure that there's no clogging, making sure the site doesn't get infected. We'll see that a lot. Again, making sure that there are procedures in place to elevate the bed. There's also different types of tube feeding. There's continuous tube feeding. There's a joint mix of tube feeding to supplement nutrition with normal eating. So it's hard to say exactly what duty it is. And I would be doing a disservice to say exact things because every patient has their own medical issues.
Okay.
But I think those are some of the major ones to be on the lookout for. But speaking of kind of being proactive, I think that falls and bed sores are the key ones I want to talk about because those are the most tragic and the most preventable, in my opinion.
Okay.
And
let's talk about falls. I know I have a client. That's how we met.
Yes.
Over a fall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So fall risk, and it's something that a lot of folks in these facilities have. And there are a lot of reasons that someone can have a fall risk, right? Mm-hmm. They could have an inability to walk. They could be wheelchair bound. They could have imbalance while seated, but they also might be able to walk on their own with a walker, but they need a walker. Or they might need hand-holding assistance while they transfer. Okay. There's a lot of different things.
And transfer, just for the audience, it's just from going from one place to another.
That's right, Frances. And again, I'm back in my legalese.
That's okay. I'm here.
But yes, that's what you're here for, to fix these things. So yeah, with falls. something I always tell my clients to do, because I get a lot of calls where it's not a case, and thank God it's not a case, because that means nothing major happened. But I tell them, if your loved one is a fall risk, make sure that they are having the right fall precautions in place. And here's some things that I always recommend. If someone's at risk of getting out of bed to go to the bathroom because of dementia, do they have mats around the bed?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they make specific mats that are beveled on the edges so that they don't trip over them. That's what I always recommend. Now, someone with dementia, it might be appropriate to have bed alarms. And these are alarms that go off
When they get out of bed.
That's right. Now, there is some mixed there's some mixed research on whether that is almost unhelpful for someone with dementia, because it could confuse them, anger them. But what they do now is they make actual alarms that you can record a loved one's voice and say, "Mom, get back in bed. Mom, get back in bed." And that has been proven to be more effective and less, startling to someone with compromised mentation.
Okay.
With falls, really, I think it's really incumbent on the family to talk with the facility and say, what are you doing to prevent this? Tell me what it is. Is it bed alarms? What level of assist are they getting? One person? Two people? Is it only on moving from the bed to the chair? Are they using a Hoyer lift? How many people are involved?
What's a Hoyer lift?
A Hoyer lift is lifting off. It's a machine that has kind of a cradle that lifts someone out of their chair to the bed. And we've had multiple cases where there was an order in place for 2 or 3 people to be helping with that process because someone was a little bit overweight, and there weren't enough people there, and that person fell out of the Hoyer lift and passed away. And it's heartbreaking because that is so preventable. Had they had the right amount of people there, it would have been fine. And so with falls, the first step is to understand, what is the baseline? What are we doing here? The second step is to reassess if there's ever a fall, because oftentimes it's not the first fall that's tragic. And they will call you and they'll say, "Oh, Mom had a slight fall. Don't worry, we caught her. No big issue."
I know.
That is a big issue.
They do.
That is a big issue.
Do that.
And you need to say, and you need to get out there and say, okay, what are we changing now? What are we adding to fix this and to stop this from happening again? Because even though that fall might not have caused any major injuries, the next one might. And that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal. So I always encourage, the family members, my clients, to just be on the ball and really know in email, tell them, what are you doing? Have them write it down, because then they know if they screw up, they're in trouble.
Right.
And that's the whole point of all of this. Obviously, why I do this is to hold them accountable when they mess up.
Right.
To take money away from them so that it costs them money when they hurt people.
Right.
But the best news ever, the best day in my life would be if I came in one day and the phone was not ringing. And there were no new clients, because that means our elders are being safe.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my views on falls, is to really understand the precautions in place. What level of assistance? What devices? Walkers? Are there wheels on all 4? Are there tennis balls on the back? Is that from the doctor? Did they determine that? Ask questions. They have to tell you. And if they don't tell you, that is a giant red flag.
Yeah.
If they cannot answer what they're doing for your loved one, you should be very nervous about that place.
And my next note is bed. That was...
Oh, the bed sores?
Yeah. Oh, that's it. Bed sores. Tell me about that. Now, sometimes I had one client who, even though he wasn't acute, he was in an acute care facility. In fact, that's why I was involved. Is acute care facility wanted him in a skilled or a rehab center.
Right.
But he had just horrible bed sores, and sometimes there's nothing that can be done. So what's the difference? What's going on there?
So when it comes to skin breakdown, I don't want to say there's nothing that can be done, because the vast, vast majority can be stopped.
Okay.
Now there are situations where something is unstoppable, but that's very, very rare. And what we see is the things that the defense counsel will suggest as reasons for a bed sore to be unavoidable are actually risk factors per the literature. Things like bad blood flow, PAD, PVD, diabetes, those are risk factors. And when you see a risk factor as a facility, you need to care plan around that.
Okay.
So that's how we see that. But bed sores, basically, for someone watching the show that might not know, what it is unrelieved pressure on a bony prominence on the skin. So if you see and you push your fingers down on your hand, you can see it blanchable. It goes white, right?
Yeah.
Now, you or I, as healthy, cognizant individuals, if we're laying on our back too long and it hurts, we move to the side.
Right.
Because we have it together and we have the ability to do so. Unfortunately, a lot of folks in these homes don't know what's going on or are unable to move on their own. And that's when bed sores start.
Wow.
So for family members, and I know this is a bit bizarre, but you really want to make sure you check your loved one's skin. And there's a certain few areas you always want to be on the lookout for.
Okay.
The most important is the sacrum. It's the lower back.
Okay.
And when you feel your lower back, you can feel there's no fatty tissue in between. It is skin and bone.
Yeah.
It's and it's also
sort of that devil's tail
Yes,
of the spine.
exactly, right there. The coccyx, the sacrum, it's all the same area. And what you want to do is you want to check that area and see, is it getting red? That's what we call a stage 1. Okay. There's 4 stages of bed sores. If you see it getting red, they need to be doing something. Okay. That's a huge red flag because these things can change in a heartbeat. It can go from a very small thing to death in a week.
Wow.
It is shocking.
In a week?
Yes.
It's an infection?
Well, so what happens is when the skin, the pressure's unrelieved on the skin, it will open up. Okay. And it'll look kind of like if you cut your skin a bit, like I'm trying to think of an analog, like maybe if you have an ant bite and you itch too much and there's a hole.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it looks like. And that's a stage 2. But once it's open, the horse is out of the barn, and the actual, it can go deeper and deeper to a stage 3 or even a stage 4 where it goes into the fatty tissue. And it's
an infection.
Well, it's an open wound. And that open wound very often gets infected with MRSA, E. coli, awful things.
And
sepsis.
MRSA's always in a hospital. I know my mom got MRSA.
Sure. But you're just inviting it in when you have a gaping wound.
But if you have open wounds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But another area I would really suggest that family members look at is heels. Heels. And again, these things are so easily stoppable because you might have seen that there's orders in place, float heels, right? Floating heels just means have the heels lifted up or put a pillow underneath to relieve the pressure from the heel. Yet we see time and time again, these facilities do not do this. They just don't. And then all of a sudden you have a stage 4 on your heel where you can see deep down into the bone and there's amputations, there's death. It's atrocious and it's so preventable. But one more thing I want to add, particularly towards sacral wounds, the key to everything is turning and repositioning every 2 hours at minimum. That is what I would ask every family member to ask. If their loved one is unable to move on their own or needs assistance, they need to be on a schedule, moved every 2 hours, and it needs to be signed by a CNA. And it should also dictate what direction they're being turned in. Because you can imagine if they don't, someone could go from their back to their left side, to their back, to their left side. Yeah. And then you have pressure on both without any pressure on here. So that is something that is easy to do. It requires you and I could do it with a loved one. It does not require medical expertise, but the problem is a lot of these facilities are understaffed. And so they won't have enough staff to do it. And then they won't mark it off. Right. And then in 2 weeks, your loved one has a bed sore. And then I don't even want to go from there. You know where it goes. Yeah. It's just awful. So that's what I would really, for all the viewers out there, if they remember one thing from this whole thing, if your loved one cannot move on their own or needs help, every 2 hours, have them show it to you. Have them tell you how they're doing it. Watch them do it. Go to the facility for 6 hours and see, did they do it 3 times? Yeah. Don't take their word for it. Watch them. And if they don't, you go to that administrator and you tell them, I'm writing this down. I'm writing this in an email.
Well, it's funny because I know that just from the work I've done, it's not so much watching them every 2 hours, but even when my doctors review records for me at assisted living or nursing homes, you see where sometimes they put the bed rails up, sometimes they don't put the bed rails up, sometimes they put the rugs down, and the other thing they do so that people, you and I can probably read records, but most people
I would hope I can.
Well, but the issue is some people don't know the difference between the nurse's note, the doctor's note, the case manager's note. And that's, you have to know it's the doctor who's leading the charge here. The nurses and the CNAs are supposed to be implementing what he said. So where does that end? I mean, if they're not implementing, is it the case manager who's supposed to say, "Oh, you're not implementing I mean, how does that
Sure.
part work?
So you're absolutely right that the doctor puts in the order for all of these things. A doctor will put in an order for medicine, for treatments, but when it comes to turning and repositioning, that does not require a doctor's order. That does not require a doctor's order. That is standard protocol. And from the millions of depots I've done where you talk to a director of nursing, they will admit that they are required to do that. That is the standard of care of a nursing home. If someone cannot move on their own, they need assistance with that. And they need to be moved every 2 hours because that's what happens if you don't do it. So there are certain things, for example, I guess a treatment that assists with appetite. That needs to come from a doctor.
Okay.
That cannot come. A CNA can't say, "I'm going to give this appetite stimulant because I think that's necessary." That's a doctor's decision.
Okay.
But turning and repositioning is not a doctor's decision.
Okay.
That is a baseline care.
That's
plan.
in your Bill of Rights almost.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to be free from injury. Yes.
Yeah.
And that is the absolute way to stop that from happening.
Okay.
So yes.
Wow. And I know I have one client who actually fell from her bed. And what had happened in this particular case is her children had asked she'd always had bed rails and a queen size bed. And she was in a memory care unit, but she was in her own bed. And so then they put her in hospice. And this is my beef with hospice and Medicare. But let me say at the onset, hospice can be and is a very good thing.
Sure.
Okay. But because it's run by Medicare, the government's involved. And some of these hospice providers, in my case, especially the for-profit ones, the first thing they do is change beds. Then they order a wheelchair, even if they already have a wheelchair, and a commode, even if they, that's so unnecessary because they can bill them for it.
Right.
I mean, and in this case, they ordered a bed, and she was in her queen size bed. She was very happy there. They had bed rails. They had an order for the bed rails, and the hospice took it out, and she fell out of the bed, broke her femur, and died 5 days later
I'm so
in
sorry to hear
pain.
that.
In
So sorry to
pain,
hear
yeah. But they said, "Oh no, don't worry. We can put her close to the ground."
Right.
Well, do you have a right as the child to say to the hospice, "No, you can't do that. I want the bed rails there"? I know bed rails are an issue.
Sure. And I don't want to speak out of turn because I haven't reviewed the chart. I don't know what the orders were in place. But if there's an order in place for something like bed rails,
from another doctor.
Which again is a clear fall precaution preventative technique.
Right.
And someone takes that away for unknown reasons. Now, if a doctor came in and said you don't need that, that's a different story.
Right.
But if that order was in place and they took it away because they wanted to make money, yes, that is most definitely something I'd want to look into. Now, again, all of these cases have a lot of moving parts.
Of course.
So I can't say from just hearing that whether or not that would be something we'd be interested in. But again, that's incumbent on us to look into. And I am always happy to look into a case on behalf of somebody. And if it's not something that we can help with, we always let them know. And we say, hey, this is not for us, but please call somebody else, get a second opinion. But with regards to that, yes. In talking about Medicare in particular, we do actually some whistleblower cases as well.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
Tell
on a
us
few
about
of those.
those.
It's very complex, but basically what we've seen is that's okay.
That's my dog.
Okay. Yeah, we have a guest with us today. So with whistleblower cases, basically the whole point of it is the False Claims Act is when someone bills or defrauds the taxpayer, they are a relator, someone who catches them on that, can bring it to the government and they can actually bring a suit on behalf of the taxpayer.
Right.
Right. And so when it comes to Medicare in particular, there are huge issues where a lot of these nursing homes will purposely understaff. They'll lie about the care provided or not provide the care that they're supposed to. And workers will actually call us and they'll say, hey, I'm an administrator at this facility. I've got to let you know that they are not doing what they're saying they're doing, or they're providing therapy for people that don't need therapy just so they could bill those hours. And we hear that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to clarify because I've been saying very bad things about nursing homes. Not all nursing homes
No,
are bad.
I know. No,
But-
it's true.
And obviously my view is, slighted by the things that I do. I only see the bad ones, but I do see a lot of them, which is scary.
Mhm.
And I think one thing I want the family members that are watching this to take home today is really be the eyes and ears for your loved one. Look
It's
out,
so
because
true.
at the end of the day, a lot of these facilities are understaffed on purpose to make a lot of money. And they just don't have the time to care for your parents, right? It's not to be someone that's aggressive or angry all the time, but it's definitely the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
It's
If you
so
say,
true.
hey, my mom was not turned for the last 4 hours, they're more likely to turn your mom
Right.
than if you just don't say anything.
Well, and also, I think you should know that you don't tell people when you're going to come see your parents.
Yes.
I showed up whenever I wanted to. And the minute I walked in that door, everybody stood at attention because they knew I was going to go right back to mom. She was in a nursing home, or my dad, who was in assisted living facility. And honestly, in an assisted living facility, you're still paying $5,000 or $6,000 a month, right?
Sometimes more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are definitely.
Unbelievable.
But amazingly, all these elders can be treated the same. So the onus in many respects, is on us.
Mhm.
And even if you have to hire someone to just go check on your parents, go do. If you have the money, do it.
Mhm.
If you need someone to go by twice a week and spend 3 or 4 hours with them, I say do it. I
Sure.
mean, we did that with mom.
I will say, though, two things, because I definitely want to talk about assisted living facilities. We have not touched that yet. And I think
Yes.
that's really important for your viewers to understand. But another thing I want to mention is that I don't want anyone to take away from them that the duty is on them to stop these injuries from happening.
No, not the
duty
injuries.
is on the facility. They're the ones that are being paid by the U.S. government, by insurance. Obviously, I would recommend, and I hope that you take away from this, that the more involved you are, the less likely these things are going to happen.
It's true.
But I have so many clients that call me and they feel guilty. They feel like they're at fault. No, it is not your fault. You are not a medical provider. You're a family member.
Yeah.
Even someone like me who's been involved in this world now for a long time, who knows this, if I put my mom or dad in a facility, it's not on me, it's on them.
Mhm.
That's why they're getting paid. So I don't want anyone to think that the onus is on you to provide or determine what appropriate fall precautions there are, or to determine what the appropriate skin breakdown preventative technique should be in place. Like, that is not your job.
It's not. I
But
agree.
you are an ally here. You're an ally for your loved one. And you should always have that mindset when you're in there. Have a look. Get to know CNAs. Get their numbers. Talk to them. They're working hard. They're
Take
trying.
cookies. I used to take cookies.
Yes. I
Yeah.
always say bring sweets. Bring gifts.
Yeah.
You catch more flies with honey, right,
Yeah.
Francis? Yeah.
Although I've often wondered why you'd want to catch flies.
That's a good
I'm
point.
just saying.
I've never thought of it. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about assisted living
Yes.
centers.
Yes. And that is seeing the marketplace right now. And it is a marketplace.
It
It's
is a market. Yeah, it's a business.
We see a vast proliferation.
People make a lot of money.
That's what it is. People make so much money off assisted living facilities because at the end of the day, nursing homes are paid by Medicare. They're paid by insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Assisted living facilities, I've seen bills for $10,000 a month.
Oh my
$10,000 a month. And you think about what you could get even in a city like Miami. That's, very fancy stuff.
Yeah.
$10,000 a month, you could be living in the nicest of places. That is,
Right.
and
With a caretaker, a 24-hour
Exactly.
caretaker.
And what these folks do, and I'm not saying every assisted living facility, what they do is a lot of them promise to the moon on the way in,
Mhm.
and then something bad happens and they go, we're not a nursing home, not our fault. And that I hear every time. Because when I bring these suits, they'll say in their openings in mediation, they'll say, look, I'm sorry, we're not a nursing home. We can't give that level of attention. Well, you literally told my client, we're going to have one-to-one transfers with mom every time. So you're lying. And what's really unfortunate is that the regulations that apply to nursing homes, which are bad in the first place,
Right.
but there are regulations, do not apply to assisted living facilities. You need to be very, very aware that assisted living facilities are not the same as nursing homes. And they've created a new thing, which I know you know about, memory care.
Oh, yeah.
That is a branding. That is a Diet Coke as opposed to a Coke. It is the same. The regulations in Florida are exactly the same for both of those things.
Oh, they are?
Exactly the same.
In other words, memory care and assisted living facilities, ALFs, are run by the same statute.
Yes. So if you look at Chapter 429 of the Florida statutes that governs assisted living facilities and memory cares. Nursing homes are under Chapter 400. I don't want your viewers to have to sit there and read the whole thing. That's what I do. That's why you hire me. But if you're curious as to see what rules are in place in Florida, those are the rules. Now, there are federal rules that govern nursing homes.
Because of Medicaid.
Right.
Because they're involved in the
but
Medicaid.
Assisted living doesn't have that same level. And it shows, because something we see all the time too is these new assisted living facilities. They're beautiful from the outside. Mm-hmm. They're stunning. and in contrast to the way we view nursing homes as kind of outdated and old and hospital-like, it's a breath of fresh air for loved ones to see, oh, fantastic, I can bring my mom or dad here. But unfortunately, that facade is a selling point.
Yeah.
Oftentimes.
Yeah, because you're the one who's going to go visit.
That's right.
I mean, that's the issue. You're the one visiting. So, I want to visit here.
Yes.
This is so much nicer.
And the humanity of it. I mean, you know, I don't think anyone really wants to jump and put their mom or dad in a nursing home.
Oh my God.
The problem is oftentimes facilities are able to accommodate someone who's an assisted living facility resident for a period of time. But then their acuity, their needs of assistance get too high. And they need to take them to a nursing home, and they don't do it because they're getting $10,000 a month. That's a common thing we see. So it starts off with someone who was appropriate, but they have dementia and it's degenerative. And 2 years in, they really should be going. They really should be on their way out to a nursing home, and they don't. They hold on to them. They promise the world, and then that fall happens where they break their femur, or that bed sore happens because they can't reposition, or that, you know, any of these horrible things. And then they say in the suit, "We're sorry. We're an assisted living facility. You knew. It's so infuriating. It makes my blood boil even talking about it.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. So the memory care, they just say okay, we're going to do more for you. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that the best way to look at it is it's a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. There is no difference in the law is what I'm getting at. So
that's a huge deal.
Hypothetically, there are places that do a different level of care, different level of staffing.
Because you pay more.
You pay more.
You pay more.
So they say that that's going to happen, but do they actually do it? I would say some facilities, no. Some facilities is exactly the same, and they just charge more.
Oh, wow.
It's infuriating. But yeah. So, one last thing that I want to talk about on both ALFs and nursing homes, and I have to say this again. This is something I always talk about when I do these things. Arbitration agreements. Have you heard of those?
No. You've got to say you don't want an arbitration agreement.
Yes. You have to say no to that. So what they do nowadays at these facilities is they will put in your very thick stack of papers that you sign in. This one page, and it might not even be in bold. It'll say, you agree to submit to arbitration if there's an issue. Mm-hmm. And it will be very innocuous. You're probably thinking more about your mom or dad's care. You're not thinking with a lawyer hat on. Well, what they end up doing is, if God forbid something happens and you call me, that really limits your ability to get a just result and hold them accountable. And they do that on purpose, not to help in any way for you, but to manage their exposure if they hurt or even kill somebody.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing, is that's part of their profit-driven model. It's infuriating.
Well, the other issue that people don't understand about arbitration, in my opinion, is they think it's like, oh, well, that's just like mediation.
No.
But mediation only happens when you sue. In other words, arbitration, you don't even get to sue. You have to go.
It's tricky because it depends on the arbitration agreement. Basically, the common thing we see is you do file a lawsuit, but it gets kicked out of court. It goes into this arbitration thing. And oftentimes it'll be a panel of 3 arbitrators.
I was going to say 3.
Yeah, but it's sometimes 1, but sometimes it's a panel of 3. And at the end of the day, it's not the same as being in front of a jury of your peers, because you and I, we're members of the community, right? Mm-hmm. We think of this as our people, right? If someone's mom gets, and there's awful things where they get attacked physically, sexually abused.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I see this stuff. When I put my mom in the picture and I go, no, I'm going to charge you to heck and back if you do that, because that's not happening in Miami-Dade County. But an arbitrator could be from Texas, and they're a lawyer. They're professionals.
Yeah, they're
so
not.
I mean, and it's not to.
Are they lawyers often?
Generally, it's not to speak ill of arbitrators, because they're doing their job and they do a good job of it. The difference is, what arbitration should be for is when there's 2 very educated, very repeat people in a transaction that know more about the law than common folks like us.
Right.
So a good example of that is in my past life, I was working in capital markets in the UK, and we were raising debt and equity for big multinational companies. And we did a big deal on a pipeline in Azerbaijan. Now those folks, if Exxon and somebody else has a dispute over a pipeline in Azerbaijan, I think you're a very smart person, Frances. I don't think you would know up from down on that. I wouldn't either. Yeah. So it's good that they at the outset agree, here's who we're going to appoint, here's the rules, here's the stuff. Let's compare that to what happens at a nursing home.
Yeah.
A nursing home chain gets sued hundreds of times, a year.
Yeah.
Right? And they're doing this all the time. Their lawyers write the arbitration agreement. And who are you? You're someone who's looking after their mom or dad. You come in and you just sign whatever's put in front of you. You didn't negotiate that.
Right.
You didn't understand the implications.
Can you negotiate that arbitration agreement?
That's a question I ask all the time when I depose the administrator about the validity of arbitration agreements. Sometimes, but people don't. I mean, how would you know what the appropriate rules on discovery are?
No,
I mean, it's absurd. How would you know what the appropriate rules on when fact witnesses should be reported? It's legalese that I know because I do this for a living, but a common person doesn't.
But so I guess the question then becomes, if the arbitration agreement is in there, how do we get out of it? I don't want to sign this arbitration agreement. I mean, I suppose if the nursing home has 3 or 4 beds or rooms available, they might swing one way or the other, right? I mean,
yeah. And again, it's a great question. And Frances, your mind's in the exact right place. The short answer is there is no answer. What I recommend to clients is just don't sign it and see what happens. I wouldn't even make a whole stink about it.
Oh, okay.
Just don't sign it. Give the stack of papers back and your name's not on there. You didn't sign it. Now, if they tell you a week later, you need to sign this or else we're kicking mom out, then I would send an email to them saying, please explain why you need this.
Yeah.
Why do you
need this? That's a good idea.
Let them write out to you why you need this. Because the truth of the matter is they don't.
They don't need that. No, they're just trying to save themselves money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's that's the big picture thing as we're closing here. A lot of these facilities, not all, but a lot of these facilities are really focused on the bottom line. They only care about money.
Well, of course. I mean, have you seen the people who own these? And remember.
Yes, I have seen them.
and they're all privately held companies. I mean, they're in the hundreds of millions of dollars of profit. And remember the guy who owned the nursing home in Florida that killed the 14 people after Irma?
Yes.
I mean, he kept his license for like a year and a half just through the back. And he was allowed to keep bringing new patients.
It's absolutely shocking.
I mean, I'm like, wait a second. This guy is accused of murder and you're allowing him to still bring in patients.
It's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I like to be positive about growing old because honestly, I think this is a time where you can live and have a great life and all of that stuff. And most people, I think the average age for nursing homes now is 86 or 87. It's closer to 90 than it is 80. And at that point, these people are only there because they don't have someone who can take care of them. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah. And
we should be doing that. We as a culture.
Yes. And that's what I wanted to say. And again, Frances, we agree on so much here. There are really 2 routes to change this, which is the reason why I'm in this world, right? Number 1, and this would be the better one, is politically, is to pass laws, is to give more funding, is to make stronger rules. But no individual can do that. I can't do that. You can't do that. I know you have I know you have a lobbyist pass, so you tried. But one way that you could tangibly hold these people accountable is, God forbid something happens, is calling a lawyer like us.
Yeah.
Because look, I'm not going to say that one case is going to change the world, but I can tell you in aggregate, what we do makes a huge difference because that is the only thing they care about. These offending facilities, they only care about money.
Yeah.
They don't even care about news. They don't even care about bad PR.
No.
I mean, literally, you can look at their Yelps and their Google reviews. They're awful, but people keep going because they have no other option.
Well, they don't think they have another option.
Right.
And I think that's what we as a culture need to, that's why I wrote the 2-minute warning. And I think we're almost at an end. Am I wrong, Tommy? Okay.
It was such a good conversation.
I know. I did want to say one thing about the 2-minute warning, and that's what Vince Lombardi said. He goes, we didn't lose a game. We ran out of time. So why, as elders, do you want to, just run out of time?
Yeah.
You don't want to lose a game. You want to win it. And as their children or loved one, you have to make sure that they're doing everything possible in these nursing homes. And really, I want them out. I want everybody to have that little chip, All right, but we have to go. David, thank you,
Frances, thank you so much for having me.
This is so great.
Amazing.
I learned, I took a whole bunch of notes, so thank you so much. Tommy, thank you. I know this was sort of one of those last minutes. I love the new studio. Hey, and if you want me, it's parentyourparents.com. If you want David, it's senior.
Yeah, seniorjustice.com. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're happy to help in any way we can.
And this is miamicommunitynews.com. Thank you so much for joining us.